Okay. Thank you all for joining us. Thanks to those who waited patiently while we let the room fill. We are really looking forward to today's presentation by Jeff Burkhart of Mission Forward, Fundamentals of Better Boards. So before we get started today, just a little bit of regular housekeeping that we like to do. First of all, we are recording the webinar, and anybody who registered to attend will receive an email with a link to the recording in the next few days. And as always, today we will be using the Q&A function for any questions that you have. Please submit them as they come to you, and we will kind of warehouse questions and leave time at the end for Jeff to answer whatever you want to ask him. So again, my name is Peter Benson. I'm the SVP of Treasury Services at Park Bank, and I'm very excited to have with us today Jeff Burkhart of Mission Forward. He is a repeat presenter, and we're looking forward to what he shares. We love having Jeff with us. If you are not familiar with Jeff, with over 20 years of experience leading government and nonprofit organizations, Jeff really focuses on high-level support for nonprofits. This includes executive leadership coaching, strategic visioning, helping build organizational capacity, board development, fundraising support and coaching, and probably many more things than we can squeeze into this short bio that you are seeing. For more than 14 years, Jeff served as the executive director at Literacy Network, and he transitioned from that role in late 2022 to start Mission Forward, where he works collaboratively to help build sustainable structures that empower nonprofits and promote innovation that lead to increased impact. Sorry, Jeff, I moved too slowly. Please, the floor is yours. Thank you for joining us and presenting today.
Great. Thank you so much, Pete. And thanks to you and Park Bank for hosting this webinar and for asking me to join you today. It's a great honor to be here today with all of you. Thanks so much for joining us and taking time out of your busy schedules to learn about boards and to talk about some of the challenges that you might be facing and some of the ways that boards can improve their development. So just to start out, this is actually a great way for us to test out the Q&A feature in the webinar. I'd love to just hear from you in the Q&A box. If you could just type in some of your challenges with your board. We'll give a couple of minutes for that to populate, and then we can talk about a couple of those. So what are your board's biggest challenges? Okay, we got some coming in here. Accountability, one of them. Board member recruitment. Just going to jot down a few of these. Any other issues that you're looking at with your board? Getting board members involved. Board member participation and recruitment, again. We've got consistency and clear obligations. Okay, so these are pretty common challenges that we face, and of course, fundraising. Every board I've worked with anyway has said that fundraising is a challenge that they have experienced. And these are very common: accountability, recruitment, participation in the board meetings, and fundraising. Those are, I would say, probably your 4 top challenges for boards. Well, I'm going to touch on all of these things and kind of give you a framework and some structure and some tools that you could use with your board so that you can build a better board. You can work together to identify some of these challenges and start to work towards better accountability for board members, ensuring that board members are not only showing up to meetings, but also taking part in the work that you need to do to achieve your strategic initiatives, and how to better recruit board members. So I'll be sharing some ideas about how to do that as well, and increasing participation on a regular basis. So we'll go ahead and dive in to the presentation. And one of the things that I always like to share at the beginning is to start with the basics that board members may or may not understand. And that is that you do have legal obligations as a board member of a nonprofit organization. These are some of the legal concepts that boards need to address. So there's three primary areas: the duty of care, the duty of loyalty, and the duty of obedience. I will tell you a little bit more about each of these, but I will tell you also that the Council of Nonprofits has a list of roles and responsibilities and legal duties that board members need to understand. And I can share that with you later on as well. So first off, when we talk about the duty of care, it is important that you as a board member understand how to use your assets prudently. So that includes not just the financial assets, but also your facilities, your staff, both, I would say also volunteer staff. So any volunteers, any paid staff, and of course, engaging board members. Those, I would say, that is a clear role of the board to manage the assets prudently. You also need to manage the goodwill that you have in the community. So you think about your reputation and the reputation of the organization. It's also important that you as a board member make decisions in the organization's best interest, so that you put your personal interests secondary to the interests of the organization. And you make those decisions with the best intent for the organization. Part of the duty of care is also to exercise reasonable care when you're making decisions. So to not be hasty, make sure that you have resources available when you're making a decision to spend money, and that you have a good plan for how the resources are going to be utilized. And also paying attention to the organization's activities and operations. So tracking how the organization is doing and delivering on its mission. Secondly, the duty of loyalty. One of those is to avoid conflicts of interest. So every board member should sign an annual conflict of interest statement that identifies any potential conflicts of interest. So for instance, if you work at let's say a human resources organization, and there's a potential conflict with a contract that could come up, you would want to identify that. So you wouldn't want to bid on a contract with the organization to support you or your business. Don't use insider information for personal gain. So if you know about something that's happening within the organization that they would be spending money on, you wouldn't use that inside information to leverage your own personal gain financially. And you also make decisions that are in the organization's best interests and not in your own. And then finally, the duty of obedience, following all the laws, rules, and policies and regulations of the organization, and also performing responsibilities in a way that is faithful to the organization's stated mission. If anybody has questions you want to chime in, please feel free at any time, and I'll be glad to answer those questions. I'm going to really focus on these four areas in this presentation. In 1 hour, this is about as much as I think we can really cover. But in this class, or in this workshop today, we've identified four main areas of competence for a high-functioning board of directors. We're going to review each of these four areas in a little bit more detail. In order for you to support the organization effectively, nearly every action that you take needs to be strategic. Boards are composed of dedicated and busy people, and your organizations are often really stretched thin, as we all know. Engaging in strategy is an essential component of your work to make sure that you put your skills and work to work in the most effective way possible. A high-functioning board works to identify the community resources, both financial, material, and human, that help the organization conduct its work as effectively as possible. When you're thinking about oversight, of the organization, that third bullet point. That includes approving and monitoring the budget, building collaborative relationships with staff to ensure that the work is done effectively, and reviewing the board and the CEO performance on an annual basis. Now, the board manages operations by making sure that it builds committees that focus on the strategic initiatives and generally has the people in place necessary to accomplish its goals. I do have, if you look in this in the box here, I think Aaron, I don't know if you've shared the link there. If you look in the webinar chat box, there's a link to my website where I've posted all of the free resources that are being that I'll be talking about today. The first of those resources is a checklist that identifies the 4 roles of a high functioning board. And I based these materials on some resources from Board Source, but I added some ideas and thoughts based on my own experience in working with boards. So the first area, I'm going to start by talking about strategy. So your board should review your mission, vision, and values every few years to affirm that they reflect the goals of the organization. I would say that most boards probably do not change their mission statement very frequently, but at the very least, reviewing these core organizational documents is important for you to reaffirm at the very least for your organization so that you are able to re-engage with those foundational areas, the mission, vision, and values. Your board should also, at the same time, engage in strategizing and looking at the work every few years. And then after developing a strategy, developing really concrete strategic initiatives that the board and staff can engage in guiding the actions of the board and of the organization as a whole. And those initiatives really, literally, should drive all the work of the organization. So in other words, everything your board and staff do should have a connection to those strategies and the initiatives that follow through on that. So if there's a new mission-related project that pops up in the middle of the period covered by your strategic plan, be sure that you have updated the plan with the new project and make sure that it fits with the strategies that you had identified. Your strategic planning documents should really be actively updated at least every quarter. And I would say in every board meeting, you should refer to those strategies on a regular basis. They should be used as a way to document the progress that you're making as an organization. If you have an executive director, that executive director report really should follow the flow of the strategic plan so that you are not just keeping that strategic plan on the shelf, but it actually drives every single thing that you're working on. And of course, you're going to need a solid plan for the organization to make sure that you're using your time and your resources well. So you do need to plan well in advance to ensure that you've developed something that's going to work for your organization's future. So all of those initiatives that you've created should really be drivers of your work. When we talk about resources, a board matrix can list the skills and attributes of your current board. And it can really be used to identify any gaps that you have. So I have a sample board matrix on my website that you can use. You can download it and fill it out for yourself. And that is something that can be helpful as you are looking at potential new board members. Now, as you think about the resources that your board and staff currently have, be thoughtful about the types of areas of greatest need for your organization. As your staff and board have identified those changes, and as the members of the entities change, you also need to think about how you can work with your team to ensure that you have the skills and the resources needed to be successful in delivering the services and in support of your organization and the mission. I do have another document, which is a roles and responsibilities agreement, which is really, really helpful for a lot of the organizations that I've worked with over the last few years. They did not have a roles and responsibilities document that held the board accountable. So one of the first things that you all mentioned was accountability as an issue. One way to hold the board accountable and to ensure that everybody is participating in the goals of the organization is to approve a roles and responsibilities agreement. So have the board in a meeting go through this document, this template that I've created, that I've shared with you, and you can modify it however you want. So in the document, I say each board member will participate at least 6 hours a month in some activities related to the organization. You can change that number to whatever works best for you as an organization and whatever people can agree to. But what happens when you approve a document like this and you've actually taken the time to discuss the roles and responsibilities of the board is that everybody is on the same page about what the expectations are for the board members. And then board members start to see themselves a little bit differently and they start to participate more regularly. Now, certainly not every board member is going to hold up their end of the bargain, but most people do. And it's really helpful, especially if you are in a situation, if you're a board leader and one of the board members is not participating in alignment with that agreement, you can have that conversation with them, and you can say, "Look, this is the agreement that we all signed and we all agreed to. What can we do to make sure that you're participating? And if this is not the right time for you to be an active board member, that's totally fine. We understand that life is busy, but this is also an opportunity for you to engage with board members, and they may decide maybe this board isn't the right opportunity for me right now because I just don't have enough time. That may give you an opportunity to recruit new board members who would be active participants. So sometimes turnover in that way can be really helpful in re-engaging your board. Because I think if there are board members who are not participating actively and the other board members see that happening, then they may feel like, well, why should I participate in all this work because this other person's not participating? So sometimes having people roll off the board if they're not participating actively can be really helpful to re-engaging other board members as well. So your development committee charter and your annual development plan are other resources that you could look to help focus the energy of your staff and board. So think about the types of teams that you have on your board. Most boards do have a development team that may be made up of other volunteers in addition to board members, and that you have the right resources, the training and the support necessary to make sure that your team and your committees have the skills that they need to really engage in meeting the strategic goals of your organization. To build financial resources, you often have a need for focused marketing, public relations, and so that might be the type of board member that you would want to recruit. Another thing that the roles and responsibilities document that I shared has included in it is an expectation that board members contribute financially to the organization personally. They make a personal financial contribution that is meaningful to them. So in the document that I put together, I didn't give a specific dollar amount, but it is important that all board members contribute financially at some level. And the reason for that is twofold. One, it demonstrates that there is a strong commitment on the part of the board member to make sure that the organization moves forward. And if your board is being tasked with connecting with the community and asking the community for contributions, they should also be invested. They should financially be investing into the organization. Secondly, uh, many grant applications ask you how many of your board members are contributing on an annual basis. And every organization should be able to say 100% of our board members are contributing to this mission. And I think grantors like to see that, because if you have an active and engaged board, that means that your organization is really set up for success. You have a group of advocates who are willing to support the organization with their own money, and they're also out there in the community and talking about the work that you do, and they're really enthusiastic about making sure that you are moving forward. So making sure that you've got those things in place will really help your board to move forward. And this also helps you with recruitment, by the way. So if you have all of these things in place, we talked about the roles and responsibilities document, and you are looking at recruiting new people, you can give them this approved roles and responsibilities document. And when somebody says, well, what do you want me to do as a part of this board? Why would I want to join your board? You have this thing that you can use, and you can say, the expectations of this board are X, Y, and Z. We can demonstrate what we want to accomplish, and what the board members are going to be a part of. So this is going to help you not only with holding your current board members accountable, but also help you with recruiting new board members. Any questions at this point?
I am not seeing any, Jeff.
Okay. Well, I will just keep plugging ahead. So I'm going to talk about oversight, and there's actually 3 different areas. I couldn't fit all 3 of them on this slide without it being illegible. So I'm just covering the first 2 on this slide. But oversight really falls into 3 primary areas: financial, human resources, and program delivery. So it's a really good practice, even for your smaller organizations, to engage with an external auditor who looks at your finances on an annual basis. They might file your 990s. They could also identify potential internal controls that would help to guard you against fraud or theft. I have an example from when I was the executive director at Literacy Network of an internal control that was put in place after an audit. We didn't have any significant challenges, with any kind of fraud or anything like that, but they put some things into place that would help us to identify potential fraud or theft. So the auditor that we worked with, Wegner, who's really great to work with, made a suggestion that we have 2 people work together to open the mail and sign off on any checks that came in the door. This was a very simple thing to implement. It did take a little bit of coordination of people's schedules, but once we got that figured out, it was a really simple practice that we'd have 2 people sign off every day once the mail was opened. And then we had a process for where those checks would go. So that helped to protect us against theft, but it also helped to make sure that our development department quickly logged our gifts and deposited the checks very promptly so that we could then thank our donors for their support within just a few days. So it actually helped our development processes to be a little bit faster. And it provided some support and protection for the organization. Your auditor can also be a great advocate and partner for your organization, making sure that your board members understand the financial standing of the organization. So whenever there's an audit report, having your auditor come in and talk with your board about what steps you have taken to increase the sustainability of your work, and looking at some of the the larger picture issues with your finances. So looking at the balance sheet, making sure everything is solid, and your finance committee, your treasurer should work closely with your auditor to establish a really powerful team that looks out for the best interests of your organization and its financial health. Your team should also really work closely with an insurance broker to make sure that you have the coverage that you need to protect your board. So having board insurance, as well as to protect the organization and any property that you own as an organization. Your broker can be a great partner in protecting the health of your organization as well. So if you look for a broker in your community with experience in working with nonprofit organizations, they're going to be pretty familiar with the specific needs of your organization, and they will go out and look for policies that are within a reasonable cost and provide the level of coverage that you need for your organization. And that's something that really should happen annually as well. So your audits and your insurance should really be things that you have on your calendar that you schedule out whenever there's a decision that needs to be made. So of course, I know that not all organizations have paid staff, but for those that do, there's often a staff member or a team of staff who are in charge of the operation. So I'm going to just put the title of CEO around that. Whoever is leading the work of the organization, it really is the board's responsibility to hire, support, and evaluate that person or group of staff members, and to build a positive working relationship with them, build on mutual commitments to the mission, to the goals of the organization. It's really important that you have that on your calendar as well. So these are things that, as we think about oversight, the types of things that really an organization should have it on the schedule and the annual calendar that you do these things really regularly. And this is, I think, where some boards can sometimes get into some murky areas where if these things aren't taken care of, and of course board members are made up of volunteers, so it's hard to really hold them accountable. But there needs to be a leader of the board who says, this is our calendar. This is how we schedule these really important 3 things that I've listed here: the audit, the insurance evaluation, the evaluation of your staff, your key staff members. And this helps you to build a really positive working relationship with the staff, with the volunteers, that they see that you're taking care of the things that need to be taken care of. So there's a higher level of trust. They know that you're committed. They recognize that there's a great deal of transparency in this process. Nonprofits, they can be difficult when we get into situations where things are not taken care of. But when you have these things scheduled out and people are taking responsibility for making sure that they're carried out, then things can run really smoothly. And that demonstrates a high level of accountability. The third level of oversight for your board, and I actually intentionally put this one last because most times with most nonprofit organizations, program delivery is managed by your staff. And you do want to have oversight as a board member of the program delivery, but you really should be relying on the expertise of the staff members who know how to deliver these programs. But it is important to make sure that you're gathering feedback from the people who are being served as a part of this program. So whatever service is being provided, whoever benefits from that service, getting some feedback from them as to how you're doing and what changes might be made, and working with your staff to engage in improvements on a regular basis. So while I think it's important that there's a high level of transparency for the board, there's also importance for there to be high level of transparency for staff members as well. So staff should be open to suggestion and should be seen as partners with your board members in helping to move the mission forward. And then finally, the last thing there, reviewing your systems to monitor and track progress of programs. Many organizations face challenges with how to manage your outcomes. So what sorts of data management practices do you have in place? Is there a need for an improved database that you're using? And how are you tracking and reporting out on these outcomes? Many organizations have obligations to report their outcomes to granting agencies. And so it should be relatively easy for you to translate those outcomes reports to board reports. And those are things that your board should be looking for on a regular basis as well. Questions? Pete, anybody chiming in over there?
You know, I do have a question here. As you talk about providing feedback to board members, do you believe that board members should receive an annual review? And if you
Yes.
do, who should that come from? Should it
Yeah.
come from an executive director, a fellow board member?
Yeah, I think it's really helpful to have feedback. And the board should be doing a self-evaluation at the very least. And I also have included a relatively simple questionnaire for your board to consider to do an annual self-evaluation. And you can do this anonymously. You could put this into a Google form and just ask all board members to complete that Google form and to provide some feedback. But I think it's really important for board members to look at themselves and to look at their fellow board members and to evaluate how they're doing, and then to identify potential improvements to the processes that they have in place. Thanks for that question.
Oh, thank you. I think we're good to keep moving ahead.
Okay, great. So operations. When you think about operations within your business, if you're working in the for-profit sector, we've got a lot of different areas that you often would want to think about, and they're fairly similar when we're evaluating operations with a nonprofit. So the first thing that you need to manage is the CEO hiring process. So that's probably one of the most important things that boards are faced with if there is a change in the leader of the organization. Putting together the package and the process, the position description for selecting a new leader. Also ensuring that not only the compensation of the leader is in line with other organizations in your community, but also other staff members. So making sure that you've allocated a sufficient amount towards staff salaries so that you're not losing people on a regular basis because they can go find a job at another nonprofit organization and get higher pay. Another area of operations we talked about briefly is engaging in board recruitment and onboarding. So ensuring that your board is composed of folks who are committed, but also have the skills that are needed for your strategies to move your organization forward. Also creating professional development plans for your board. And conducting the regular organizational reviews. As I just mentioned when Pete asked that question, reviewing the performance of the board, making sure that your board policies are up to date and relevant to the organization, and that your committee structure is aligning with the strategic initiatives. So if one of the strategic initiatives is to improve outreach to the community, perhaps you have a committee that is dedicated to that role. And then also ensuring that your board meeting agendas are not just focused on reporting what happened in the past, but focused on the actions that you can take as a board in the future. So those are the key areas for you to think about. And I'm going to pose a question to you. As you think about your board or boards, what are the strengths and needs that your board has? So there's a checklist, which I think we shared the link to that. Hopefully you've had a chance to take a look at that. What I'd like for you to do is go through and review that checklist. Identify your strengths. Where are you strong? And then how can these strengths be leveraged to support your organization? And then after you've done that, think about the top 3 areas where your board needs to develop. What are the top 3 areas that your board needs to work on? I'll give you a second to take a look at that. So that's the link that says the roles of a high-functioning board that's on that list of resources on my website. And I'm going to ask you again to list out, if you choose, any of the areas where you think you need to develop more from that checklist. You can do that in the Q&A box. Do we have anything coming in, Pete?
I'm guessing there's a little bit of a delay as people are typing here. So as we start to see things filter in, I will certainly let you know.
Great.
In the meantime, I've had another question pop in, and it kind of goes back to the initial setting strategies portion of the of the presentation here. Do you have an opinion on what the maximum number of strategic initiatives should be inside of an effective strategic plan?
I think that's going to vary, Pete, depending on the size of the organization, the size of its board. And I think if you have a sufficient number of people to work on it, and it also might also be relevant to how complex the various initiatives might be. So you may have an initiative that's relatively low effort that you could accomplish in a shorter period of time. It might relate to, let's say, social media posts. Like we want to do 3 social media posts every week or something like that. That's pretty achievable. But a larger issue of like raising $2 million, of course, that's going to take a lot more people and a lot more effort and time. So it kind of depends on how complex the initiative is. In general, though, I would say when I've worked on strategic plans with clients, we tend to have around 15 to 20 particular initiatives that we wind up with. And they would be grouped usually 3 to 5 kind of umbrella categories. And then we'd make sure that we had assigned different staff and board members to each one of those initiatives, and that we have a timeline for when those things are going to be achieved that is reasonable based on the amount of effort that we're going to have into that initiative.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I hope it makes sense to our person posing the question. it seems as though we have a shy group here. Nobody has insight into where their board needs to develop or wishes to share
That's
that.
okay. That's no problem at all. And so what I'd like to do is talk to folks on the webinar about what your next steps would be in board development. These are powerful tools. So if you haven't used any of these tools yet, bring them to your board and talk to your board members about at the very least, the board roles and responsibilities agreement. If you don't have something in place already, please take this, use it, modify it however it works best for you. This will transform your sort of inactive board into one that is more active. I can't guarantee that everybody's going to adhere to all of the things that are listed in the roles and responsibilities, but it will move the needle. We will start to see more people engaged in the work of the board. And there's also the board development matrix. So that's something that could be really helpful. You may have seen something like this before, where you just kind of list out the skills and talents of your board members, and what areas of expertise they might have, and what areas of expertise you need on your board. So then you could start to look at board recruitment in a more strategic way as well. So these are tools that I've made available to you. I'm happy to talk with you about how these tools could be used with your team. And the high functioning board checklist, I think that everybody's on a continuum. I don't know any board that is doing all of the things all at once. So every board, I think, is still in process with improving its practices. So if there are areas of this board checklist that you feel like you're lacking, don't feel like you are alone, because you're definitely not. Most boards are constantly challenged with making sure that they have all the pieces in place that they need to be a high functioning board. I've just provided this to you in a way that is, one pager, that you could kind of get a quick glance at the areas of greatest need for your organization, and hopefully have provided enough resources here for you to get a good start on improving your board. With that, I'm happy to answer questions that you have about how to implement some of the changes that might be necessary for making a high functioning board.
Sorry, I'm gonna hop on camera here. I think that would be maybe just give kind of an example or an overview. I think that would be helpful to a lot of people because I imagine uh, people are absorbing all of this, Jeff, and it seems like a lot, and it seems like maybe if you're not the board president, like what do I do? How do I start this conversation? And then what should I expect to come out of it with the right people on the board?
Sure. Yeah, I think the first step really would be to do a quick assessment of the areas, and that's why I asked people to identify the top 3 areas um, for your board to work on. So, what are the top 3 for you as an organization? Um, and then to start to look for resources around those. If it's accountability, as one person or a couple of people mentioned at the beginning, if we look at accountability, we could really stand to have a strong document in place that would make sure that all board members agreed to participate in at least the board meetings and one committee meeting. So it could be really helpful to increase the engagement of your board to have those things in place. Even if you're not the board chair, you could bring this to the folks on the board and say, what do you think of this? Is this something that you might consider implementing? So feel empowered to do that with your board chair and with the leaders of the board.
Excellent, thank you. And thanks to our anonymous attendee who is echoing that they are, there's a lot of great information that they're absorbing it and that they feel like maybe that's why there's silence. A lot of people are processing and doing their own checklist
Yeah.
internally. Joey just chimed in with a question. If board member engagement is lacking quality, how do you try to re-engage those board members?
Mhm.
And how do you know where the point is maybe to let them go to just a committee or to just let them
Mhm.
go?
Yeah. Well, I think I'll go back to the board roles and responsibilities document again. That can be really helpful if you go through the process. And I've actually worked with a couple of boards on implementing the roles and responsibilities document. Um, that helped to bring some of the folks who had been less active back into the more active realm. So they actually engaged in conversation around the roles and responsibilities, and they started to think about ways that they might be able to participate more. So I saw from that standpoint a few of those board members who were maybe on the sidelines a little bit because they didn't know what their role needed to be. So that's often, I think, one of the reasons that board members are less engaged is because it hasn't been clear to them what the expectation is for them to be engaged. Many board members, I think, feel like they're fairly passive in terms of getting information about what's going on with the board, but it hasn't really come up that a board member needs to participate in one or two of these different things yet. So when you're intentionally reaching out to board members and identifying ways that they could be engaged and involved in the work and providing them with the support to help them do that, then you're going to start to see more of that type of engagement. But there are certainly going to be times, and I've had to work with my board chair as the executive director, when board members were not showing up despite my best efforts to reach out to them, to ask them, how things are going, to try and get them engaged in the mission of the organization. This was kind of early on in my days as an executive director. And I did talk to the board chair and I said, I've reached out to this person a few times and they still haven't come to meetings. Um, one clause that we put in place in the roles and responsibilities document is if you have missed 3 consecutive board meetings without any notification of the fact that you were not going to be there, we could consider that a voluntary resignation. And unfortunately, that's what we had to do in this one case. And we did contact that person and say, this is this is what we've decided to implement. Uh, but that actually does that turnover can be good, and it makes sure that other people on the board see that as we're taking accountability and responsibility for making sure this board is active and engaged.
Yeah, that's an uncomfortable conversation, I can imagine.
It is, yeah, but sometimes necessary.
Hmm. Emmett is wondering if it's better for leadership staff to use these tools and draft and present some things to the board or to develop them in conjunction with the board from the beginning.
Hmm.
Um, is it part of strategic planning meeting or is it,
Hmm.
an assignment from the executive or something other than that?
Yeah. I think it's great to have the leadership of the board create a first draft. So maybe your executive team on your board. So we think about the roles and responsibilities agreement. Maybe the leadership team discusses and identifies, what it wants to have listed on in that agreement, and then brings it to the board for discussion. and to make sure that everybody on the board can agree with the roles and responsibilities, and that people then will sign a copy of the roles and responsibilities document. I think that's a really important component of it as well, because especially when you're implementing something for the first time, the board members did not join the board with this thing in place. And so it needs to be something that they can all agree to at that point in time, and then move forward with that board agreement in place. And hopefully that helps to guide better accountability for the participation of the board.
That makes a lot of
Yeah,
sense. Thank
yeah,
you.
thanks, Ebbet. And then there was another question I think we skipped over there about the committees.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
gonna actually rephrase that
okay,
just
great.
a touch because I know you touched on it at the beginning. You generally see a finance and a development committee, and should be an executive committee. Are there any committees that you think a nonprofit should have that you have generally seen they don't? They don't give it consideration. Are there any that you think are really useful that you don't see a lot throughout the clients that you've worked with?
Yeah, one thing that every nonprofit has challenges with is getting the word out about who they are and what they do. Um, Virtually every nonprofit I've worked with has demonstrated that they need to do more of that. And so, and then another one is, of course, the financial development. But I think that most boards have a development committee. Not a lot of them have a marketing and outreach committee, or sometimes they're kind of tied together. And I think there are very discrete skills that you need to engage in for marketing outreach versus financial development. So I think one of those areas is, definitely if you don't already have a marketing team in place, start to think about ways that you could engage your board in getting the word out about what you do. Having regular stories about the work and the impact, and engaging with having board members tell their story as to why they are a part of the work, what inspires them. Those are two really powerful tools that I think board members could benefit from.
Excellent. Thank you a lot for that insight because I have not seen many of those types of committees either in our work with nonprofits, and I know that storytelling is the most effective way of connecting people with your message, with your mission, and as you said, it's often the hardest thing to do for many nonprofits.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm doing a webinar next week on that topic, taking data and stories to create greater impact. So it's something that I've done a lot of work on, and I think is really important.
Well, excellent. Um, I have one final question for you, and that is if people want to get in touch with you to find out about maybe this webinar that you're presenting next week, or um, to see how else you may be able to help them, do you have contact information that you can share?
There you go. Thanks. That was a good transition, Pete. Yes. So there's my contact information. You obviously found my website already, so you can learn a little bit more about the work that I do, and I'd be more than happy to chat with you to discuss your particular needs.
Fantastic. Jeff, really appreciate you taking time out of your day to present and to give people these tools that at no cost, really, very powerful ways to help them improve their boards, their work on the board, whatever their role is. As always, we really appreciate your insight and the work you do within the community. Thank you so much for your time and for edifying us today. And we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you so much, Pete. Thanks to all of you for being here.